So race is not key. Okay, Garn said so and so is basically race ka definition. Dobbs and said that this is the kind of definition. Both pad liya. Okay, features and you know and something and answer ho gaya. Is it ready? Still, it's not like this. Okay, race is a very interesting sort of a subject. Last year we had a student who basically did just that. He took the course after clearing prelims. After clearing prelims, the student basically switched to anthropology. Actually, test series के लिए आया था. Okay, but then 2 टेस्ट के बाद पता चल गया कि सर मेरे पास दिल्ली के सभी बुक्स हैं. Okay, and I'm not able to handle these kind of analytical questions. ये तो मेरे and he was basically switching from another option. ये तो पिछले option में भी यही problem था. We don't have too much time. Competition next year नहीं है. Right? Who is going to get selected is going to be almost finalized. 90%, 95% of the finalization is basically going to happen by December. Hello everyone, welcome. Good evening. How's it going? So to all of you, just welcome aboard, and let's basically have a quick little orientation about, you know, the foundation batch that we are going to have for your anthropology optional. We are beginning very soon. Okay, my name is Nataraj. Okay, so I teach anthropology here. So from what I'm given to understand, some of you are beginning, some of you have already taken an attempt. Okay, got it. So I'm guessing that most of you are at least beginners when it comes to anthropology, right? Okay, so that is that. We'll try to keep this session very, brief. Okay, but whatever kind of questions that you have, please do ask me so that, you know, we can work it out. If the questions are regarding scheduling and all of that, right? Sarrthi. If there's any question regarding anthropology and how you should basically pursue your anthropology, me, right? Is that clear? Okay, so I hope that that kind of thing is clear. Okay, right. Now, let me basically begin with a few points, right? First thing is going to be that, this is basically the period when most students feel ki thoda sa lull period hai, right? And that's basically what most students feel, right? Just before prelims, the first half of the year is the most action-packed part of the year for most UPSC students, right? All the way from Jan, of course, even the notification has not come out, but you are, waiting for that particular notification, right? What is it going to be? It's going to be the same as last year, but doesn't matter. You're eagerly looking forward to it, right? So from Jan, basically, it is a very busy time of the year, right? And post June, when you finish your prelims, right, you're going to have a small little period for your mains. Most students who are writing mains, wo ladenge for sure, right? You will also have those students who are basically ladenge, along with the guys who are writing 2025, okay, or writing mains for that particular year, but because they have not been able to get that a little bit of a luck, then go their way in prelims, okay, they'll still be fighting, okay, all the way till mains. But mains ke baad jo period hota hai, right, that is a period that many students, this is the biggest what not to do in UPSC, right? You feel ki, there is 3-4 months before, prelims ka season, but these 3-4 months go like this, right? And everybody makes this mistake, right? So because this is a time we actually don't have a lot of time is basically what I want to start with. So let's talk about this, right? So we are starting a foundation batch for anthropology, right? So we are going to be starting very soon, probably tomorrow, probably day after, as soon as the schedule has been finalized and given to you guys by Sarrthi team, right? So what are we going to do, right? So around 80 classes of anthropology, and we want to sort of finish off your optional. And when I say you want to finish off your optional, what do we consider as finishing off your optional? Right? Is it me coming to the class and giving you a good rundown of what exactly is anthropology, what exactly are the different kind of modules? Okay, how do you basically study each of these kind of modules, right? What exactly is the expectation from those modules? Is that it? Actually, no, right? See, mains ke bare mein baat karte hain, right? Prelims is something that you have to write. Okay, it's an elimination sort of a test. You have to do whatever it takes to be able to sort of, clear the exam, right? Okay, you have to basically get to mains. Mains may you basically have a very short period, and I believe this year we had 85 days. Okay, that is less than 3 months, and those 3 months it's a very difficult period. It's a very short period. Whatever kind of preparation that has to be done for mains has to be done pre going into your prelims ka mode, right? So if somebody is going into prelims ka mode without having done their mains, right? So that's not the ideal sort of an approach. And I'm sure that I'm at least hoping that most of you guys know this, like clearly, right? You cannot basically clear your prelims and then think that, I have some subjects that I have to sort of study. Nahi hoga. Right? So we'll talk about this. So in the very beginning, I'm going to tell you, okay, 3.5 months, okay, no sugarcoating, time is limited. Okay, the time to basically make it count is going to be at this particular moment. Okay, so that is that. Okay, so see, this is going to be a fun batch, okay, because this is going to be the last batch that we are going to have for the students who are writing in 2026, right? So the students who are basically writing in 2026, this is going to be the last batch, okay, for them before they sort of go into their prelims season, right? You cannot basically do it after this, right? So main syllabus has to be done before prelims, and that is something that I've already told you. In those 3 months, there is very little time to do anything else. Now, optional ka subject kya hai, right? So if you take a look at your GSK subjects, GS subjects are slightly different, right? GS subjects are basically your school level subjects, right? It is school level books. Meaning, let's say that, in case you have to do your geography, what are the books that you do for your geography? Right? You have to do your 11th class ka NCRTs, you'll do your 12th class ka NCRTs. Some of you will basically start from 6th all the way till 12th, but revise jab aapko karna padega, basically you'll go to 11th and 12th. If I basically talk about history, what will it be? It's again going to be your new NCRTs, your old NCRTs, your Tamil Nadu, or whatever other sources, that's basically hot in the market, right? Whatever it is, school level. वो आप prelims के लिए भी पढ़ोगे, you'll have to use that for your mains as well, correct? That's going to be your base. School level. Optional, school level का कुछ है ही नहीं. Optional is one of those kind of papers जहाँ पे you have to select one subject that you are at a 5 years advanced in comparison to every other kind of subject that you have been writing. Okay, it might be 500 marks, right? Okay, in comparison to, let's say, GS subjects, right? But actually the difference comes here in your optional, right? The most important sort of selection, okay, the most important sort of selection for Labasna, all these things are basically driven by who has done well in their optional for that particular year, right? Most students in Labasna, agar aap jaake dekhoge, right? I'm telling you from experience from our students who basically say, more or less in GS mein, they're all in the top reasonably good sort of attempts, whether first attempts, last attempt. But who was the one who went to interview, or who was the one who just missed out on interview, and who are the ones who basically went to Labasna, who are the ones who basically got the good services, who are the ones who basically have to sort of fight it out for a better sort of service reason again, right? This basically is completely driven by what was the optional, not exactly what was the optional. Okay, every option is a selection honge, right? But who has done well in that particular option for that particular year, right? So last year I had a student, IPS, primarily because of anthropology, okay? Very first attempt, very first mains, right? So we have a lot of these kind of students, right? But this year, so he had already done it. He was kind of confident, but this year he wanted to improve from IPS to IAS. But unfortunately, there were a lot of things in these 87 days that he had to go back home. Father was not feeling well, had to take a couple of weeks break, come back. A whole lot of things happened. Okay, optional May, he was not in the top, right? Anybody who is in the top in whichever optional that they have basically chosen for that particular year, Labasna. Optional is very, very important. It is a subject that has to be done not at a bachelor's level. Okay, it's not at school level for sure. It is something that you have to have a proficiency at about master's level. Okay, and master's level ke liye, that's 5 years of syllabus, right? Even most of you would probably have your bachelor's, right? Usse bhi zyada, right? But in a very short period of time. Now, the thing is, it's not about remembering too many things. Okay, thankfully in anthropology, you don't have to think and remember so many things. Syllabus is relatively limited. But understanding at a master's level is definitely different from understanding at a undergraduation level, and it is also different from understanding at a school level. Right? School is very different, right? Because school may, even with regard to history, there's no debate with regard to history, right? What is history, right? In school mein it is like, so and so, isko yaad rakho, isko aapko exam mein likhna hai, marks milenge, right? But here it's about different sort of interpretations, right? So that is that. Anthropology also will have its own such fields. If I ask you what exactly is anthropology and what sort of interests you to anthropology, the general sort of answers that I've heard from students, okay, I like people. I like to know about different sort of cultures, I've traveled to a couple of places, and after that I realized that I find it so fascinating, so interesting to learn about different sort of cultures. And if I have to do that for months around the year, okay, there is nothing like it. I'm going to be enjoying vicariously of of different sort of cultures, different sort of practices, different sort of institutions, and so on and so forth. That is one thing. Okay, many of you are like, what, I know for sure that it's a small syllabus, and that's a very, very important sort of factor for me, because what I need to do is that mujhe zyada nahi karna. Okay, that is more important, right? If I can just do this again and strong and be stronger and be better than the others, so will it work? Yes. Okay, so definitely small is basically best for me. Okay, that is another group of students. The other group of students essentially are, based on how Anthro has performed. right? So every single year you will see students who are in the top 10, okay, top 5, top 3, top 20, top 50, top 100 में अगर आप देखोगे, it is always like, double digits, right? For one option, right? Okay, so that's a pretty big number. In fact, our student Aditya, he had basically done, with us for the last 2-3 years. So this year, basically, we put him in foundation-related work, and we'll talk about it a little while later in case we have a little more time. Okay, but rank number 9, the highest ranker from anthropology, right? Okay, phenomenal guy, right? So you have all of these, right? So you have to understand anthropology can be chosen by students for a variety of reasons, but scoring in anthropology or any sort of optional is going to be unlike your GS. GS is kind of like your board exams. Now, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, you guys must have written your 10th class board exams and 12th class board exams. Yes? Okay. What do you remember about it? Okay. When you were writing your board exams in 10th, okay, did you even think how is this person doing? How is this person doing? Oh my God, this person, if he does well or she does well, it's going to affect me. ऐसा नहीं है, because board exam is more about what have you done. उसके लिए there is a very clear sort of marking that is going to be provided to you. If you've done X, Y, and Z, your teacher will tell you कि अगर आपने X and Y and Z पूरा कर लिया वो 3 घंटे में, okay, 90%. अगर आपने X, Y, Z and then A and B and C कर लिया, then it will be 95% and 98% and 99%. Okay, अगर आपने सिर्फ X किया, then it is so and so. Okay, it's very much in sync with like what you do. But optional is one of those papers, jहाँ पे it is very much a ranking system, right? So for instance, how do you think about ranking system? If any of you guys know what is a percentile, okay, a percentile is essentially, if I say top 1 percentile, it basically means I am in the top 1%. If I'm basically saying you, my student, okay, you are in the top 1 percentile or in the top 5 percentile, that essentially means that amongst all the students who have written with optional anthropology, you, okay, are in the top 1%. So let's say that, this particular year, we are having a number of, let's say 1,200 students or maybe 2,000 students. This is basically the range of people who are selected with anthropology, for mains, right? So if it is 2,000 people, if I say you're in the top, 1 percentile, that essentially means that you're in the top 20. Okay, if you say that you're in the top 5 percentile, again, you can do the math and understand this. In every optional, top 1% is scoring. Getting to the top 1% is the hardest part. Right? It's not only about what you do, it's also about how others do. In fact, you can understand this even a little bit in prelims, right? Okay, the top 10,000 people are going to clear. Correct? Okay, it's not about ki aapke marks kitne, right? Okay, of all the marks, okay, who are the ones who are going to get the highest kind of scores, so who are basically going to get some benefit? Prelims mein, it is that you're going to get a chance to write mains. Okay, anthro mein or in optional, it is basically you're going to basically get the high scores. Right, the scores of 300, 320, 150, 160, 140, these are all very, very high scores. It basically means for this particular year, and I'm not talking about, let's say, a couple of years ago, the high scores were 160 plus also, right? But in these years, right, you guys must know, right, the cutoffs have basically come down a little bit, okay, and good score is basically 150, okay, 145, 140, right? So these are all good scores. Right? Okay, so very, very good scores, and we'll talk about, and we'll basically take a look at some of the students, how they have done their papers and so on and so forth as well, including one of the copies of, even students who are writing mates this year. What exactly is anthropology, right? You have chosen it for whatever reason. At the end of the day, love in the subject is important, okay, but it's also about how you basically get to score. So anthropology is essentially a subject that is it comprises of many different sort of fields, many sort of disciplines, right? Okay, so why do I say this? You will have a little bit of history. So whatever you study in your ancient history, regardless of the book that you're following, whether it is your ancient India, okay, whether it is your new NCRT, your old NCRT, whether it's your Tamil Nadu book, right? All these kind of books, what do you see, right? The first few chapters are going to be, it's not even starting with IVC, Indus Valley Civilization. You have your Paleolithic phase, you have your Old Stone Age, you have your New Stone Age. This is basically ancient history. So this ancient history, okay, is going to be part of your anthropology syllabus. Correct? Okay, so that is going to be one. Okay, then the other subject is going to be, let's say, Indian society. Okay, so understanding what exactly is Indian society is all about. In mains also you have GS1 May. I think 90, 100 marks essentially comes year after year from your Indian society, right? Your Indian society ka subject. Right, so that is another one, right? So similarly, you will have, so there is some political sort of aspects, there are some economic sort of aspects, and so on and so forth, right? So all of these things basically put together is anthropology. So any field or any discipline that essentially deals with humans is basically called as anthropology. Right, so any sort of discipline that basically studies anthropology, and those aspects that essentially study anthropology are going to be your the field of anthropology. So यहाँ पे ऐसा है. So it's combined. Multiple sort of disciplines are going to be involved in this particular subject, but at a small level, right? So you don't study history like the history optional students do. It is going to be relatively less. Okay, you're not going to be studying Indian society at that kind of a level. Okay, so it basically comprises of many different kind of subjects, right? And all of them not at that kind of level, right? So little, and that's why we say anthropology ka syllabus is relatively limited. Okay, but relatively limited may you still have to be in the top 1% or top 5%. I don't want you to take it too easy thinking that acha chota sa hai. Yes, chota sa hai, so that you can basically complete the syllabus in a shorter duration. Right, you can basically feel like I have gotten a good hang of the subject in much lesser sort of time. It can basically create a quick sort of revision in much lesser time, right? These kind of things you're basically going to get, right? Of course, right? So that is that. So anthropology is actually a mix of multiple sort of disciplines. It borrows from multiple sort of disciplines as well, right? So you'll have for let's say 2-3 weeks you're going to be studying one particular subject, and then immediately you're basically going to move to another sort of a subject, and after that थोड़ा सा polity आप सीखोगे, उसके बाद थोड़ा सा economy आप सीखोगे, थोड़ा सा biology सीखोगे. Okay, not to the level that you basically study in your GS, right? GS में मतलब you have to understand botany भी आपको करना है, zoology भी आपको करना है, the basics. यहाँ पे just humans, okay, especially the genetics aspect, right? What exactly chromosome के अंदर मतलब it's like 9th class का this one, right? So it's not that much in kind of detail, right? Not as much as you would want to know in your GS, right? Okay, so biological anthro, you don't have to think that it is इतना technical वगैरह है नहीं, right? So it's basically more about not just biology, it is biological anthropology. Okay, meaning how does it basically influence humans, right? How does it basically contribute to humanity? What are the kind of applications? How does it basically help us understand a lot more about ourselves, right? Okay, so that is basically what this subject is all about, right? So now the thing is, see, generally when you study liberal arts, and most of you who have actually not studied liberal arts in university, okay, you will have something that you probably don't know about this particular subject, because these subjects seem very similar to the kind of subjects that we have done in school, right? So in school, it's basically like, just studying whatever is given, rote learning, theek hai. Actually, it is not like that, right? When you come to the bachelor's level and definitely at the master's level, they are not, you don't have anything that is very clearly matter of fact, right? In anthropology, there is nothing as fixed as a fixed matter of fact. Okay, every idea is basically a product of many debates. Okay, many sort of contestations, one group, another group. Okay, so no, ऐसा है, नहीं, absolutely ऐसा है because of so and so kind of reason, नहीं, ऐसा नहीं हो सकता because of so and so kind of reason. That is science. That is a scientific way of doing things. Observation, experimentation, validation, right? Okay, and proposing some sort of hypothesis, disproving hypothesis, accepting hypotheses, theory making, and so on and so forth, right? It also basically involves many reinterpretation of the past, right? So how we expected it to be in so and so way, okay, about any particular thing that you're trying to learn, whether it is human evolution, whether it is about human polity, or whether it is about human, roti kapda makan, in different kind of societies, okay, it might be reinterpreted later. Okay, it might be contested. Nahi, aisa hai. They do so and so because of so and so. Nahi, they don't do so and so because of so and so. They do so and so because of some other sort of reason, right? So anthropology or any sort of liberal arts subjects at a master's level is more about understanding how these debates are. Okay, what are the different sort of sides? It need not be two sides also. It could be multiple sort of sides. Okay, and those sides will have those scholars who are like so personal about their views, right? Okay, so nahi, absolutely, this is how it is. Matlab ego clash wahan pe bhi hota hai. Okay, so my intellectual sort of idea has been sort of like disproven. Okay, so I'm going to sort of like find faults with his sort of. You get the picture, right? Matlab academia, that's basically what happens. But this enriches the subjects. It enriches the field. It enriches our knowledge overall, right? So you have to understand this, right? So our focus is not just to tell you ki so and so has basically happened. It is going to be key, what are the kind of debates, right? And if you're able to sort of like point out key, this is how it was reinterpreted, okay, and this is how you have strong contestations on this side, okay, UPSC would love to understand, okay, to love to sort of reward students like that, rather than saying that this is what it is and this is how it happened and this is why it happened. Right, so you have to understand that there is a lot more sort of conceptual depth that is required, especially for those who are scoring in the top 1%. And generally, many of our students, especially foundation batch ke students, do really well. In the very first mains, many of the foundation batch students do, they have gotten to Labasna because of their optional. Okay, average, above average kind of marks in every other sort of subject in mains, but optional may top 1%. What do? They actually have not done too much different. It's not that they have invested too much time in their optional. Of course they have done, because you have to fight it out. You cannot go to Labasna without that. But what they had better than the others was strong answer writing volume, but that conceptual clarity that reflects in their answers. Right? So when you're writing answers and you're writing pedestrian kind of answers, plain vanilla kind of answers, you can write as many as you want, stack up as much volume as possible, right? But that is not going to change the final output. It's not going to make your paper basically stand out, right? So we'll take a look at those as well. Okay, so why is this considered true today is one of the questions that you will basically ask in multiple sort of theories, ideas, and so on and so forth. So you have to understand, so where we stand today, or what is considered true today, or what is considered true yesterday might be different from what is true today. But what is true today is basically a product of, multiple sort of years and decades of evolution of ideas, right? So how did it basically evolve, right? So did we always believe this? Okay, or is there any sort of new idea that is basically accepted today because of some sort of evidence that has been brought in recent times, right? A lot more so in science, but this is also in liberal arts to a great sort of an extent, right? So that is that. If you are able to understand the evolution of these ideas, and we'll take a look at some of these examples. Okay, of course, we cannot go into the basics of these ideas. Some of you might already know it. Okay, some of you may not know it, but just to give you a hang of it, we'll basically just touch upon a couple of things, right? But we can't go into the theory aspects, right? So that is that. If you are able to show that you understand the evolution of these kind of ideas, and not just that you have some एक question है उसके लिए कुछ answer है वो मैंने पढ़ लिया मैंने रट लिया, regardless of what they ask me I'm going to basically be able to dump it. Okay, then you have a big advantage because ऐसे बहुत सारे students होंगे, right? But if you're able to understand the conceptual side of many of these, okay, the debates, how these ideas have evolved, okay, and how these ideas have basically been reinterpreted in recent sort of times. If you're able to incorporate these in your answers, okay, you're going to be addressing the demand of the question a lot better. 80% of your work is basically done. Then, masala elements have to be added, good scholars, some years, some books, these kind of things would basically be added, and then, it's wholesome. Okay, so that is that. Okay, so we're not necessarily going to tell you ki rote memory ke liye, focus on it, right? So rote memory is something that's not how you do really well in options, right? Okay, and this is true any subject. If you basically go in the last few years, if you see, there is no subject that basically rewards only rote learning. Okay, I know some languages जहाँ पे, and it's not very prominent sort of languages, but उसके लिए है. This is basically what I've heard, but I still don't feel कि top 1% के लिए आप guarantee कर सकते हो just by rote learning, and definitely not something that you could do in any of the recent liberal arts subjects. Okay, so that is not going to be something that is going to possibly work, right? So what do you have here, right? What is more important is that you try to sort of like bring these debates into your answers and be able to show them, not only about what that debate is, okay, but also about the fact that you are aware of it. So for example, if I can tell you, see, if there is a question about, let's say, some sort of an institution, it could be, let's say, marriage, it could be about family, it could be about kinship, right? So it's not about listing 5 definitions, इन्होंने ये बोला था, उन्होंने वो बोला था, and all this, but it's about showing how these sort of ideas evolved. Right? How these ideas basically evolved. So how our initial sort of understanding was, who basically argued what, who basically, argued against, okay, and, where does anthropology sort of stand today vis-a-vis this particular topic that we are studying. अगर आपने ये कर लिया, मतलब 80% क्या? Okay, it is going to be, complete 100%. मतलब it's very difficult for somebody else to be able to beat you, conceptually, right? In terms of the quality of your answer, it is going to be good. The only way they can beat you is agar, the student is not able to sort of like write and complete the paper, wo sab, it's basically not because of knowledge. It's not about concepts, right? So that is that, right? So let's take a look at some of these, right? So see, primatology is something, and I basically talk about this because recently, we have students who are writing mains, right? And, many of these students who are writing mains, immensely talented. They're working extremely hard. Some of them basically told me they're studying 16 hours, right? Okay, in recent mentorship sessions, right? So they're putting in a lot of this effort. But when they have certain sort of topics, okay, and जो हमारे foundations in नहीं है, right? So when they have to basically write on certain topics like primates, when they have to write on archaeology, they make it very fact-oriented. Right? Itna sara, sir, I'm actually not ready yet. I need a little more time to be able to sort of study it, cram it. Okay. And then before I walk into the exam, I have to basically just cram it once again and then go into the exam. and then I ask questions that are a little more analytical and wo kuch use nahi hua, and your approach might have been a little wrong. This happened in basically sectionals, and thankfully we don't have this kind of problem in such a short span. We were able to fix it with some extra sessions and all of this. Primates are not key, matlab unka head kaisa tha, ye kaisa tha, the angle of so and so. Matlab, it is not about this, right? There is a lot more here. See, for instance, what exactly differentiates us from so and so? It turns out 98.8%, we are similar, depending upon which, part of the DNA sequence you're basically comparing. Okay, we're literally similar. Okay, 98.8% similar, right? And not only me. Okay, it is you who is watching it. Okay, and it's 98.8% similar. That seems like a lot of similarity, right? Where exactly is the similarity? Where exactly is the difference, right? So there was a very good sort of an example. In fact, you had, where do you have this picture? I have some pictures, right? We understand these species a lot better because of, something that we call as primates, right? So these are primates. Primates are basically the whole order that we belong to. It's a whole group of family that we basically belong to. Our close ancestors, close relatives, are not so close relatives, but amongst the animal kingdom, the most sort of close relatives, right? Okay. And you can actually see that all of these people are the ones who went into the wild, stayed there, infiltrated the groups of the chimpanzee. Okay, so for instance, this is Jane Goodall, and by the way, I've basically attended a session by Jane Goodall, right? In fact, like how she, and you guys can watch her on YouTube or something like this, right? So she basically, when she went to Tanzania, right? So that particular area where you have these Gombe Stream National Park, she tried to basically get into that particular group, okay, and trying to sort of like pretend like she's a chimpanzee, and I mean no harm, right? So what would she do? She'd basically pretend like she's eating what they are eating, right? Of course, I don't know if her belly is going to be able to handle what they eat, right? But she's pretending that, okay? At the same time, she'll probably be, doing all the scratching. She's basically trying to follow all the kind of the non-verbal sort of cues, even the verbal cues, the kind of sounds. She can actually make the sounds that is exactly, she can communicate with them to a great extent. Okay, she had done that in that session. It sounds very close, right? So that is that. So and these guys tend to be vicious, right? And they're very strong. Okay, the strong, aggressive, affiliate kind of behavior is there, but still she was able to go there, stay there, be part of that particular group, learn about them, and so on and so forth. Similarly, you had Diane Fossey, who basically studied the gorillas. You have orangutans being studied by Dr. Birute Kaldikis. They all basically have broken the myth that humans are the only ones who are capable of culture. Right? Initially, we had this idea that Homo species itself is about the fact that we have culture. Other species basically don't have. Okay, they're basically driven completely by that gene. Okay, their biology, their instincts. Right? They're not capable of culture. Now, what exactly is culture? Culture is basically something that is like learned behavior. Right? I see something and I pick it up. Right? Or you can basically transmit something to me. Okay, so we can communicate in this particular way, and so on and so forth. Right? But here you can actually see that they actually disprove this whole idea that only the Homo species is capable of culture. And how does she prove it? Okay, sophisticated as we are, for instance, with your laptops and Macs and your Samsungs and your phones and your bikes, right? You have them using tools themselves, right? In fact, you can see that this is a carefully sort of made tool, okay, by the chimpanzee, bonobo, right, whichever species, okay, and they basically take it and then they break it, they find the right sort of length, they find the right sort of strength, okay, and then they clear it up, and then they apply saliva all over it, and then they sort of like fish for these termites, and then they have it, right? So they are actually using their mind, right? You have the orangutans, who basically are, in fact, this is the most intellectual. Okay, this one is a little languid in its motion, right? So it's like a laid back, relaxed. Okay, not much in a group, right? I guess if you guys have watched that movie Planet of the Apes, you probably know what I'm talking about, right? So this one is like very intellectual. It's they have they can actually learn a lot of things, right? And they can basically learn to operate some amount of even complex machinery. Right, in circuses, agar aap jaoge, you can see that they basically, they can do one, very different sort of things. In fact, like gorilla, okay, there are gorillas that basically have learned sign language. Okay, they're aware of like 2,000 different kind of words that we have. Okay, and they're not even genetically possessing the kind of genes that we do, the forms of that particular gene that we do, but they still have it. So they're very complex sort of species, and they're not unlike us. Okay, and they are unlike us in certain ways, but in many ways they're basically similar to us. So you can understand that there are a lot of debates. So to say that we are different, they are different. Okay, so that is again plain vanilla, right? Okay, you have to basically sort of delineate okay, the similarities, the dissimilarities, and who contributed to us understanding this to a great extent. Similarly, you have Neolithic phase, right? So I told you in your ancient India books, whichever kind of books that you follow or your coaching notes that you follow, you'll always start with these, right? Early Stone Age, late Stone Age, right? Okay, or New Stone Age, right? So basically, you have Neolithic as the phase jahan pe human beings basically come and they're able to develop, matlab this agriculture, right? So meaning, on purpose, they're able to sort of sow something in, okay, guard that particular thing for a certain period of time, nurture it, okay, water it, and do everything that it basically takes, and eventually be able to sort of harvest what they need from it. We know that this is Neolithic or, your New Stone Age. We've studied this. But it doesn't mean, everybody is going to, in fact, like if you see in the test series and the other sort of students who basically starting mein likhoge ya ending mein likhoge, but it is going to be ki Gordon Child essentially said that Neolithic is a revolution. But again, there are nuances here as well. Is it always a revolution? When new technology comes, everybody basically adopts it. Okay, will they completely change their way of life? Right? If when the cell phones had come, okay, my parents were completely against it. Look at this, it basically does so many of these things. All kids will basically get spoiled with it. Maybe the kids basically got spoiled, but I can tell you, my mother is spoiled. Okay, if she does not have her phone, okay, she does not have her entertainment anymore, right? So you have it. But anyway, but coming to the point, right? So what you will see is that, Neolithic is actually, you cannot sort of like stereotype that, one particular thing, one particular phase completely drove changes, in a rapid sort of phase in many places. And there are many sort of arguments on why it was not a revolution, but it was an evolution. So it basically took approximately 1,000 years, right? And you also have evidence jahan pe some members of the society decided, no, we still want to be hunting and gathering. Okay, somebody else is like, nahi, hunt kaun jayega, hunt karega, aaj khana milega, nahi milega, we don't know. Okay, I'm going to go with some less risky FD kind of approach. Okay, in fact, after many years, they've basically sort of measured the burials, the skeletons. It turns out the hunters and gatherers, on average, who shared the DNA with the same sort of group, but had delineated into a different sort of an economic system, hunting, gathering, right? So a lot more sort of protein, right, they had available, and they were 15, 16 centimeters taller than the ones who had taken up agriculture. Okay, even if you analyze the teeth, okay, the agriculturists, the grain eating people basically have a lot more sort of cavities, okay, and a lot healthier sort of teeth amongst the hunting and gathering sort of communities. Of course, the population explosion happened in the agriculturist group. Okay, it's very difficult to sort of, support a very large group, just by hunting, right? Once you become older, it becomes a little difficult unless people are basically supporting you, right? You have all of these kind of things. So is it a revolution or is it an evolution? Or is it region specific? Right? Okay, to bring these kind of nuances into your answer, okay, supported by some prominent scholars. For instance, Gordon Child is, that's almost 100 years ago, right? 1930s, Cara Bray, right? Those kind of studies, right? And then now you have your Binford and Flannery, and these are all more prominent sort of voices, right? Okay, but there are nuances. If you can bring these, this is how you basically get to the top 1% in your very first means. Race. Okay, how do you, what exactly is race? There are so many debates here, right? So race is not key. Okay, Garn said so and so is basically race ka definition. Dobbs and said that this is the kind of definition. Both pad liya, okay, features and something, and answer ho gaya. Is it ready? Actually, it's not like this. Okay, race is a very interesting sort of a subject. Right? Anthropology may, whenever you basically take a look at the subjects, they have some relevance to what is happening around us. You must have seen Black Lives Matter. You must have seen, race, when you say, a lot of students, basically the first image that basically comes is Gandhi being thrown out of that South African first class kind of thing, probably because of the movie or probably because that's the first time you've heard of it, but that strikes you, right? You have racist sort of statements, Irish, Ireland में क्या हो रहा है, there has been attacks, a 6-year-old girl, ये सब तो होते हैं, that those are the basic contexts in which you basically hear about this. But racism in the initial sort of phases was basically an ideology that some races are a little more superior and some races a little less, okay, and it was basically sort of like quantified. Nobel Prize में अगर आप देखोगे, it's only single digits, in the number of, let's say the Africans or the ones with African heritage to be able to get a Nobel Prize in the science. And if you take women amongst that, okay, no, women as a whole, it is only 3 out of 100, 3%, right? Okay, but what does that even mean, right? You have to basically take a look at the proportions. If you have only these many women and you have these many men, okay, or if you have only these many African heritage men, culturally speaking, are not able to get to the levels at which you'll be able to compete at that level. कितने लोग PhD in science करते हैं? Okay, in comparison to, let's say, some others who basically have an advantage because of industrial revolution, and Western society became a lot more sort of advanced in the modern world. If it is medieval world, the Arabs. If it is ancient world, the Indians and the Chinese. That's the only continuous sort of civilization since way back in the day, right? Different phases, different kind of things, right? But they basically justified it, okay, through many tests, quantification. In fact, one of the some prominent, I'll tell you some sort of ideas, right? So some of the ideas were basically that all of us basically descended from common ancestors. Yes, same common ancestor, but we evolved faster, and our brain evolved much more. Okay, and hence we are more intellectual, and we are more, and that is why we should basically be commanding and demanding that people do this and this. Okay, order हम करेंगे क्योंकि हम extra evolved हैं. Okay, आप काम करोगे because you are less evolved. All these things have basically been broken. Again, through evidence, okay, contestations, reinterpretations. These are the kind of things that basically bring you to the top 1%. Right, so this is how we are going to pursue this particular subject. Okay, so we'll have a lot more sort of comparative debate style kind of approach to all of these, so that you basically get a good hang of where that field has basically sort of come from, okay, and how has it basically evolved. Okay, so this is basically what we will be doing. And generally 4 things that we are going to do in our class. The first thing is going to be that these are the 4 major sort of expectations that I'm going to have on you, right? The first thing is that you attend live, participate, right? The most important thing is not कि मतलब क्या क्या पढ़ना है, नहीं. The most important thing is walk away with understanding of the subject. That in any subject, a person who has a good understanding, when I evaluate the papers, 50 pages के booklets होंगे. When you write it, paper 1 के लिए 50 pages, paper 2 के लिए 50 pages. In about 15 pages में, you can understand कि this kid is different. This kid, the kind of understanding that this kid has, and the ability to sort of communicate that idea is like definitely, मतलब मुझे, I have to keep this kid as top 1%, top 5%. Provided the student is basically able to complete the paper and so on and so forth. Right, 10 to 15 pages में पता चल जाता है. Right, as simple as that. So conceptual clarity is the most important thing. So you're coming here not to think कि मुझे क्या क्या रट्टा करना है. वो सब prelims के लिए, वो सब मतलब GS के लिए. Optional के लिए, what do I need to understand? Second step is basically going to be the step of your handouts and class notes. ये सब होंगे. Okay, it will be very very मतलब crisp होता है. Right, and class may basically give you some unique things depending upon which batch you're from, right? So some sort of unique studies, some sort of things that are basically happening in anthropological literature that you could integrate into your answer, some sort of relevance in anthropology, some current events, like these kind of things. And then it is going to be the third step, which is going to be assignments with clear deadlines. So if you see here, and I have some assignments that is basically open of the students as well, right? So many of these students who just started like a month ago, they're doing exceptionally well. Right, okay, बहुत सारे, and we'll basically take a look at it. And the reason I want you to do this thing is that you need to build answer writing volume not after the batch. I cannot even tell you, मतलब it pains me to tell you कि there are students in my batch who have, मतलब I think 10 to 20% of them have already attended some sort of coaching before, and now they're able to understand their anthropology. One student basically told me batches, मतलब 2 sort of like institutes say he has basically done it, still does not have an idea of that conceptual clarity, especially if analytical questions are basically provided to that particular student. Okay, you're not able to understand कि इसके लिए मुझे क्या लिखना है. Okay, should I just make some notes for it and then cram it and then write it? Then the question is different next time. उसको मैं क्या करूँ? Right, so this basically happens. So the most important thing is to ensure that you put in writing volume here during this particular class. And if you have basically done your assignments, then you know कि आपको short notes कैसे बनाने हैं, and we'll basically guide you. So for instance, in the batch that is basically ongoing, the first assignment was, let's say, some 15-20 pages maybe. Okay, and just to give them an idea कि नहीं ऐसे नहीं, ये करना है, ये और करो, यहाँ पे diagram has to be on this particular side, conclusion has to be so and so, like मतलब पूरा. Okay, and they have seen the assignments, model sort of assignments, and then basically try to write. And then the next assignment was I think 50, 60, 70 kitne pages, those kind of things. Third assignment is like you have to provide the short notes of all the topics until the second assignment for completion, and then you have to basically start the next assignment. Along with it, you have to basically submit the short notes for that particular assignment. Pura, let's say whatever module is done, okay, this module tomorrow I think is going to be the end of that particular module, but that entire module ke liye they're going to be done with their assignments. Okay, I'm telling you, okay, that's like 80% of the students have already submitted everything on track. Okay, and this also includes students who are in college, right? First year ke students bhi hain, right? So 80%, some of them are basically in their 30s, some of them are already in service. and doing their assignments and things like this, right? So that is that. So the point is, they have their assignments ready, they have their short notes ready, they're going to be far ahead. So when you basically go to the next stage, which is going to be your QEP or your test series and all of this, they will be able to sort of immediately be able to compete from the very first test, right? See, you should never basically think that I have to basically compete in UPSC mains, right? Mains ke pehle itself you should basically be able to be in the top, right? So what happens post prelims, okay, or even abhi, a lot of people are basically going to be doing their test series, is ensuring that they get a good amount of answer writing volume, those who have finished their foundation or who are already doing their foundation, but after a particular module they'll take that. So answer writing volume has to be basically built to a certain extent, right? So next year what has to happen is that the competition is going to start not in September when the exam is, or in August end when the exam is. Okay, the competition is made and sort of almost wo crystallize ho jata hai. It is finalized right after the day of your prelims. These are the students who are going to clear prelims, okay, and this is the level. So these kids are basically in the top 10 ye hai, top 15 ye hai, top 20 ye hai, and it is very difficult to catch up to them. Nobody, like mere experience, I've never seen anybody be in the top 500, okay, and then leapfrog and make it to the top 15, 20. But we have some students from a foundation program. Last year we had a student who basically did just that. He took the course after clearing prelims. After clearing prelims, the student basically switched to anthropology. Actually test series के लिए आया था, okay, but then 2 टेस्ट के बाद पता चल गया कि सर मेरे पास दिल्ली के सभी बुक्स हैं, okay, and I'm not able to handle these kind of analytical questions. ये तो मेरे, and he was basically switching from another option. ये तो पिछले option में भी यही problem था, right? So I actually want to do it properly. पिछले option I started by myself, it did not work out. So this one I want to do it under your guidance. Okay, he started, he did the foundation. Test भी उन्होंने किए थे, but mostly it was this. And in one of the papers, he was basically highest in the country, one of the highest in the country. The other paper, unfortunately, the morning wala paper, he could not complete. Okay, so he basically had to take a hit. Okay, but in one paper, in two मतलब 2.5 months भी नहीं था. In 2 months, he was basically able to get to the top 3, top 5 kind of scores in the country. So मतलब 1,000 में he was basically in the top 5, मान लो, right? But he is hardworking. Okay, and whatever I would basically suggest, he would put it. Okay, वो तो है, बंदे में तो दम तो था, right? So he just basically needed like a little bit of guidance. Okay, and every day we would basically stay and then plan for him. He'll execute late night, and calls. It was a very good sort of an attempt. Okay, he was able to do it, right? But generally, this is not something that happens. Whoever is the topper in June, they're going to be able to maintain that particular lead all the way till August. Sometimes ऐसा होता है कि maybe somebody in the top 5, they may drop out because कुछ हो गया, घर पे कुछ problem है, right? Health ka kuch problem ho gaya, right? These kind of things can happen. I had a student who was basically in that level, but she was a Delhi police mein, she was working, and then there was G20, then she was basically called to work, then there was an accident, okay, and uske baad that entire attempt, she was very, very strong. So basically people may drop out from this, but to enter this at that particular level, it's not easy. Okay, and I'm saying I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's definitely not easy. And if there are students who have done it, I will show you who has done it, right? Okay, but that is, everybody can't do it, right? Okay, and that is definitely, we should not plan to be the exception. Okay, we should basically follow what is going to get you there without needing any sort of blessing from God, or miracle. That is not something that you would want, right? So that is that. So at the end of so by December, when you're done with the course, you should have your short notes, you should have your assignments, you should have your conceptual clarity. Everything is basically ready and good to go, right? If questions are basically thrown at you, right, you have written so many answers in anthropology, okay, guided, evaluated, okay, by the faculty themselves, right? You should have that confidence that, shoot, okay, I'm kind of ready. Okay, let me take up the challenge of seeing more questions and seeing if how I am basically able to handle it. Okay, am I able to sort of connect different sort of aspects of anthropology in order to sort of like craft, okay, structure, sequence, emphasize, de-emphasize, and create some some really good sort of answers. So that is basically what it is. Come June, you've got to start from the very first test, जहाँ पे you're one of the toppers. Okay, there's no coming back. वो 2 महीने में क्या करेंगे, right? Okay, everybody is going to put in the kind of time. So whatever has to happen, abhi karna hai, and that is the reality check. Okay, we don't have too much time. Competition next year nahi hai, right? Who's going to get selected is going to be almost finalized. 90%, 95% of the finalization is basically going to happen by December. right? Okay, so I know that probably hits you hard, right? But that is the truth, right? Okay, that's the absolute truth, right? So that is that. So post prelims, no time for understanding, different sort of concepts. What exactly is cognitive anthro? Is Australopithecine, Paranthropus is very different from your Africanus and Afarensis. Where exactly did you have inline kinetose? मतलब ये सब के लिए time नहीं है. You've got to know those. Okay, मतलब it should click. Okay, you have very sort of detailed kind of notes. How do I basically sort of compress it? No time. Okay, prelims, वो 2 महीने में नहीं होने वाला है. That's an attempt gone. And you never know what is going to happen in the next prelims. जब chance आएगा, right? Very first mains is basically where you have to make it count. Okay, you've got to make it count. Okay, note making, right? These are not the things that you should be doing post prelims, right? I have students who, मतलब बहुत सारे students आके पूछते हैं, sir, but my notes are not helping. I've actually invested, मतलब 1.5 साल के लिए मैंने बनाया था, and then I've basically been studying it. I feel more comfortable with it, but I'm not able to use it in addressing analytical sort of questions. I feel like I'm only writing what I have written, right? But that is not the time. Right, so look at this. Only time for revision of short notes and writing tests. Otherwise, it is going to be a wasted attempt. It is harsh, but it's 100% the truth. Right? Us samay, there is no time to do it. Whatever has to be done now. Okay. In fact, I'll basically show you. Okay. Let's take a look at. Okay, so these are some of our toppers, rank number 9, Aditya, right? So we are writing a book together. So when I say short notes, these are basically the short notes that we are getting our students to basically do, right? So, based on handouts and after having submitted the assignment and after having gotten the feedback to those assignments, students have to work on the short notes. Now, what exactly is short notes, right? So generally we tell them to divide the page into 2, okay, and try to keep it as 2. Right, because यहाँ से लिखोगे ना, वहाँ पे there'll be a lot more empty. It'll be a lot more sort of packed here, and whatever you feel you need for a particular subject has to basically go into this. Okay, ways to sort of remember many different kind of scholars and these kind of aspects you will see. But through this, right, we have our students who can do exceptionally well. So meaning, and I have students who are in the test series program, and in the very first I could realize कि मतलब how is the student able to do this? Okay, and then I basically understood that the student emailed me, sir, I'm actually a student from another institute, Forum IAS में थी वो, and it's I had taken a couple of years break and I'm actually back. But as soon as she's back, she's actually able to compete, and she's one of the toppers in that particular batch. Okay, why so? Because first of all, conceptual clarity is at a different level. Okay, that's what we have focused on. Second thing is, itna volume of writing is there, so even after a couple of years, it feels like natural. Right? For many students say this. Okay, GS pata nahi sir, but anthro to I feel like okay, theek hai, I'm in, because we have actually put in that kind of volume, right? Okay, and I asked her, ki matlab, how are you able to revise? The entire anthro syllabus is in 50 short notes, 50 sheets of short notes, 50 to 60. That's exactly what she had said, right? So that is that, and this is basically what you have. Right, and then we do these things in a good amount of detail. So the main sort of points for each and some examples. Now, and what you have to remember is that this has to make sense only to you. Okay, it does not have to be for anybody else, right? So that is that. Okay, lemurs and tarsiers and new world monkeys and old world monkeys. Okay, you have your lesser apes, you have your orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, humans, right? All those kind of things, timelines, right? So how to remember it, right? What basically is a hominin, what exactly is a hominid, what exactly is a hominoid, right? So the student basically can go through a complete module in kitne pages are there? Okay, probably like just 6 pages. Okay, GM card, again, sort of these, we have a lot of these kind of acronyms that you can use in order to be able to revise really quick. Okay, diagrams, okay, 100%. Now, these are all students who said we are not talented in terms of drawing, but we draw and then we laugh, okay, and then we make cartoons out of it, and eventually, everybody is able to at least, not be artistic, but at least be able to sort of deliver this. Okay, now if anybody else wants to compete, try. Okay, it's not going to be easy, right? Okay. In fact, like a couple of years ago, or last year, I believe, right? So, we had these, there was a particular question saying Australopithecines ke bare mein, right? And for those of you who don't know the syllabus, you probably don't know the context. Australopithecine, a lot of people had only known ki matlab ek species, right? We had done kitne hai, right? So you have your robustus, you have your boisei, you have your afarensis, you have your africanus, that everything ke liye this kind of a detail. So how does a student not do well? Right? And everything ke liye we have these kind of stories that you can remember. okay, to make it a lot easier and so on and so forth, right? So this is this again, there is another sort of a model which is to make short notes, that is like quick for revision. So for instance, my palm is kind of small, okay, but if this is your A4 sheet, sort of block this fell apart, look at this particular thing and try to recall, what you're supposed to recall, right? So things like this, all of these things essentially are submissions, guys. And again, you have different sort of students, okay, and different sort of topics. Okay, all of these things are basically submissions, and you have to get it done. See, agar so all of these things ke bina, to do well in your exam is not going to be that easy. Okay, so scoring extremely well in your fourth attempt, fifth attempt, wo sab jo hai na, that's not that difficult. Okay, because you've been doing. But to do it in the very first attempt is to have everything basically done, dusted, and prepared. Right? Okay, so that's essentially what has to be done. ठीक है इसके and to think that नहीं we'll just take somebody else का notes, okay, उसको हम पढ़ेंगे, उसको हम memorize करेंगे, उसको हम याद करेंगे, ज़्यादा नहीं लिखेंगे, right? These things are not going to fly in the real world. ठीक है, मैं I'm telling it to you upfront, right? There are people with high amount of effort, okay, who put in effort, jahan pe it is going to be very easy for them to revise really quick, and for some others it is going to be they're going to ask. In fact, I had a student who last year who when it was time for the first FLT, the student was doing reasonably well, okay, a very strong student, but was asking ki, sir, I'm just not able to revise for FLT 1, paper 1 ke liye, right? I have so many of these things, I have 300 400 pages, how do I sort of compress it? It's like abhi karna, it's very difficult, it's time for FLTs, can you? And then he sent me, can you please take a look, should I basically focus on in order to be able to revise 300 400 pages? You cannot keep it in your head, image memory nahi ban payega. And it turns out 300 400 pages of some toppers ka copy for one module, socio-cultural ka, right? Then you have your biological anthro, then you have your archaeology, then you have your fossils and primates, okay, you have your theories and other sort of miscellaneous. Ye ek paper ka hai, kaise karenge? How do you compete with somebody who has 50 to 60 pages made the entire sort of syllabus? And of course it's a lot, right? Okay, it's a lot which this particular student is going to be able to revise. Okay, very well sort of organized. Okay, a lot of examples, what needs to be remembered. Okay, again, so nice pets. Again, it is to remember, the different ways, of acquiring a particular spouse that is there in the syllabus. Some fun, interesting ways to sort of remember that I have given them, and so on and so forth, right? But how do you, how are you going to compete? Okay, it's not going to be that easy to be able to compete. With students who have put in this amount of effort. So when I say that our students have basically done and sort of cleared the exams in like one attempt, okay, the effort, especially during the foundation, has been a lot. Every year we work extremely hard for getting a rank, right? So aapko bhi wo karna hai. Okay, we have the same sort of purpose, right? So we also are very competitive that our student should be the one who is at the top, right? So we put in a lot of effort. It's a fun game, right? And those competitive juices basically flow, right? Okay, so that is that. But I'll also tell you that in every year, my topper, the highest kind of scores are basically from the foundation, and that too in their very first sort of attempts. Okay, this is another student who has made it to Labasna, okay, with the very first sort of an attempt, and by the time she basically reached this particular position, okay, which is 9 months after her course, okay, after starting the particular course, she's already writing mains test series for mains, okay, because she's writing mains. Again, you can see the kind of quality of her answers, the amount of details that she has given, okay, the presentation, and the value addition. The red is basically the value addition, and you can actually see some really, really good answers. Oops. Okay, use of a lot of maps. Foundation students. Foundation students are, conceptually they're very strong. It does not matter what is the level of the question, what is the difficulty of that particular question, right? These guys basically shine a lot more when, whenever the paper is a lot more sort of analytical, because wahan pe it becomes easier to be able to sort of differentiate yourself. Okay, and again, tools and all of these things we used to practice in class to a great extent, right? We'll basically draw. I'll basically set up a timer, and everybody gets to draw, and then we take a vote ki who's basically had the best diagram. Okay, and also ki who's had the best or the worst diagram. Okay, and then we laugh over it, and then again there is restart, right? So this is that. Okay, one of the toppers in last year's paper. Okay, in anthropology, one of the toppers in the previous year. Okay, most of these things were basically not done, in those 2 months, right? We did really compete. We did fight very hard. Okay, the student did spend time, in those 3 months cramming and a little less sleep. Okay, no, I think she was sleeping quite a bit, right? But the point is, like, she came prepared by the time it was June. She does not know it, right? Because she has only done the foundation, right? She has only done the tests, right? But it's only been 6 months. How do you know that you're one of the best, right? And then she basically did. Okay, she wrote all the tests. You can check it out in our channel. Okay, and what was their experience? And next thing you know is that above average, average, above average in all the other papers. Optional, one of the highest. And she is actually one of the only students who scored, I think close to 290 tha score, and that too after leaving 30 marks in one paper. Never seen it before. Okay, but when the quality of your paper is like this, it's not going to be that difficult to score like that. So this is another sort of a student. So the student got IAS double-digit ranker, close to 160 in this paper, right? So the student as well. Okay, so a lot of writing. Okay, so I believe the student had scored of 159 or 158 or 157. I forget exactly the number, right? Okay, but if you have a 160, close to 160 in one of the papers, what else do you need? Right? Okay, so that is going to get you into one of the top ranks for sure. So a double-digit sort of a rank. Okay, got her home cadre as well. Right? So this is that. Again, you have this. This is good old Aditya, right? Who he was my student for the last couple of years, right? And then he had done a lot of tests and a lot of writing, good answers, good quality, right? Everything had been done. And last year what we did is that we had planned, मतलब आप हमारे channel में जाके देख सकते हो. Okay, what did he do for anthropology is something that, and he's also posting answers, okay, written answers. You can go to Learn with Nataraj channel, YouTube. Okay, we'll try to post something on Sarrthi as well, right? But he's basically talking about like how do you basically craft answers, because he's the highest ranker with anthropology as the option, right? Okay, so how do you do it? So last couple of years, could not get to the kind of rank, could not get to the kind of mark that he would want in anthropology, but this year what we made him do is focus a lot more on foundation, right? So entire focus was try to get it extremely high in anthropology, and he did. Okay, and he did exceptionally well. Especially, it was good that the paper was a lot more sort of analytical this year, right? So that is that. So and he has written a lot. Okay, so a good chunk of writing definitely by Aditya. Okay. So this is that student. Not the best of handwriting. I wish he had a little better handwriting, and that could be that'll be a boon, right? But he had one of the highest sort of scores in paper 2 in 2 months after starting optional. Right after prelims is basically when he had started. He had taken the foundation. He did all the kind of thing that we talked about, the 4 pillars, the 5 pillars, right? And then ended up, scoring one of the highest. And this is basically his paper. But I also want to say, and basically he is supposed to add all the kind of the scholarly rigor, the debates in his answers, and he has to basically highlight them. So you can see that he has shown us that he has highlighted, and there are basically targets here. 150 of these things should be there. Bordeaux's linguistic capital, so these sort of things, right? You can see a lot of these things he was able to incorporate. I believe this is FLT1, so not as many as he would have in closer to his last FLTs. And I believe that he had written some 25 tests. Again, you guys can go and check in our channel. Right? But if he had a little better handwriting, he would have done even better. Right? Okay. So that is that. You can see a lot of these kind of scholarly rigor. Okay, and so on and so forth. So again, great. And again, you have this is Aditya, right? Aditya's, we have plenty of it. But last year he had focused a lot more on the foundation related work, because he had this thing that any question that we have already written before, right, I tend to have some very good answers. But when there are new questions and 30% of the questions are basically new today, right, I'm not able to handle those. So then he decided, you know what, okay, let me just do the entire sort of subject once again, right? Achhe se main karunga. And then he focused on it, wrote it. Less volume of answer writing this year compared to the previous year, right? But focus on foundation related work, writing, assignments, incorporation, how it has to be. And eventually basically got it because, Anthro gave him some really good dividends. I wanted to have one more assignment of test paper of one of the students, but I guess I did not open it. Okay, but that is fine, right? So this is basically that. So I just want to make it clear, right? Understand this. See, anthropology is going to give you very good dividends. It is a very good subject, right? Because it is short, every year you'll have at least a dozen people or 10 people within the top 100, right, in comparison to the numbers as well. Okay, so it's a very high sort of selection rate. Like every other option, you have to be in the top 1% or at least in the top 5% to get some rank. Top 1% you've got to have. Every year you have to understand this as well. Okay, who is making it to Labasna that particular year is very much about who has done well in their option that particular year. 1 year a student might, 1 year a student might not, same student might not, but who has done really well. There is no guarantee of multiple attempts in mains anymore, right? But there is going to be that time jahan pe for sure you're going to get that chance. But when you get that particular chance, you have to ensure that you are ready. Okay, those 2 months cannot be the time for doing anything for the optional except for cramming, studying, revising, practicing those diagrams, and mostly 90% of the effort is going to be about writing tests, incorporating what you have. Am I able to incorporate all the things that I could have or I should have? That is a question that is worth asking after every single test, right? Not ki I need to know all of these things. I need to know has to be done a lot prior. Okay, so that is basically an important sort of thing that I would want to say. This is basically the reality. Okay, I don't want to sugarcoat anything, right? It is not going to be that, please come on board, everybody is going to score in anthropology. Everybody can score in anthropology, but has to be backed whether you have done all the 4 pillars. But agar aapne ye kar liya, I promise you, you're going to basically, you're going to get a top 1%. If you can compete in those 2 months, and if you've done those 4 pillars, you're actually really a strong candidate. In June, you will be able to see, in any sort of program, agar aap likhoge, wahan pe aap top 1% mein rahenge. And I'm saying top 1% not in comparison to all the first timers. फर्स्ट टाइमर्स वो कोर्स करने के बाद कुछ मटेरियल ढूंढते हैं, ओके, कुछ बड़े बड़े कॉपीज करते हैं, and then they try to extract, मतलब ये सब, like I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the ones who have already written mains. I'm talking about the ones who have basically written mains and gone to interview. I'm talking about the ones who have basically gone to interview, okay, because of their anthropology. I'm talking about the ones who are already in service because of their optional, and you will be able to compete with them. Right? I've had students who basically send me, their answer copies. I'm telling them, ki, if this was a chance for you to write prelims, classroom ke, foundation ke students, itne अच्छे से लिख रहे हैं. Okay, and I hope that you too will. Okay, and very soon, and you should, within these 3.5 months, because that is all we have for your mains 2026. We don't have too much time, right? So welcome aboard. And we will start soon. The schedule is basically going to be given to you, and if there is any other questions, I'll basically take a look at it and then come back to you guys. You would like to read about society, human civilization, and and with a little bit of touch of bio. Shivan sir, okay, good. You're from Bhubaneswar. Okay, welcome. Okay, so karenge, okay? So I understand that some of you have a lot of the questions that I'm basically seeing is primarily about class timings and certain other things about the portal. I'm not the right guy for that. Okay, I would love to answer those questions, but I itself am not very familiar with the portal. Those kind of questions should basically go to Sarrthi management. Any other questions with regard to anthropology and when it is going to be and how many days it's going to take? 80 classes approx, right? Okay, by mid-December, let's see if we can wrap it up. Okay, so that's going to be the main sort of idea, right? Any other thing about like what are the requirements? Okay, what are the expectations? I hope that I've been very clear and transparent about what I'm expecting from you. I'm also basically telling you what exactly is the class going to be like, okay, and what I will do and what I'm expecting from you. Okay, any other sort of questions with regard to Anthro, you can basically reach out. You guys can, reach out through them, okay, to us or to me, okay, and then I'll basically get back to you. Okay, we start soon. Come prepared, mentally, physically, emotionally. Okay, so it's going to be a fun ride. Okay, I promise you that. Okay, so take care, and I will see you guys soon in class. Bye bye.